All right, so this video is going to be about the equipment you need to retro game. And I got three types of hardware lined up. I got the PlayStation 1 and the Nintendo and an EverDrive over here, and this is going to be all about how to game on original consoles. And the Mister is in the middle here, and this is going to represent FPGA consoles. We'll also talk about the analog products that fall under this type of manner of playing. And then we got software emulation over here, Windows Tower and a Raspberry Pi. And later in the video, we'll talk about different types of displays. I got, LCD up there, CRTs. Maybe we'll even get around to talking about Tate. And I'll talk about, how you can get out of hand with your equipment, which is what I did at a certain point. And yeah, I think that's going to be about it. So let's just dive in. First, let's talk about original hardware. This is how I got into gaming, was through original hardware. And when I started out, there were no low lag LCD monitors. So you basically, you had to get a CRT. I got stuck on Battletoads. Could not beat it with emulation. And I looked into why, and I discovered what input lag was. Went out and bought a CRT, and I've been on that CRT kick ever since. So CRTs with original hardware, yeah, it'll work. So I'm going to judge all of these different manners of playing along three parameters: how expensive it is, how easy it is to get hooked up, and the lag, how low the input lag is. I know there's other things like audio and video quality. To me, those are ancillary to gaming. I like RGB. I got an RGB cable back there. I like component video, but we're not going to talk about that. You can get good video quality out of all of these options here, and good audio quality, even software emulation. But anyways, okay, original hardware. So how much it costs? It's expensive. That's the chief problem with original hardware. So, here we got, the chief means of money is if you're going to buy actual cartridges and try and play them. And you need to get off that kick right away. So this is an EverDrive right here. This Nintendo doesn't know the difference between a little Samsung cart and a little Samsung cart that's loaded on an SD card. I can put a little Samsung on this SD card right here and play it in my Nintendo, and the Nintendo doesn't know the difference between that ROM and the little Samsung ROM on the cartridge. One costs $1,000. This EverDrive's 150 bucks. It'll play everything ever made by the Nintendo. And you got to decide right now if you're a collector or a gamer. If you only want to play your original cartridges, then you're more of a collector. And you know what? That's okay. But just be okay with the fact that that's your priority. It's not gaming. If you really cared about gaming, you would get an EverDrive and play everything. If you only play the cartridges you have, that limits what you can play. You're never going to play Little Samson, which is an excellent game. The chances of you getting into Neo Geo are extraordinarily low. It's cost way too much money. No one can afford that. So you need to figure that out. As soon as you figure it out, if you're a retro gamer, you're going to get one of these EverDrives. Or in the case of optical setups, like CD setups, you get an optical drive emulator. It does the same thing as an EverDrive. So that'll bring your cost down, but these cost around 150 bucks. I think that might have been 200 bucks, I forget. So they're not cheap. And then the console itself, probably $100. This one's RGB modified, so it was like 250. And, I don't know, 100 bucks. So right there, you're looking at 250, 300 just for one console. And if you want to get multiple consoles, it adds up to 1,000 bucks real quick. If you just want a Neo Geo and a ROM cart, that's $1,000 just for the Neo Geo. So I rate the cost of this at the highest for original hardware. It's really expensive. So As far as input lag, it's at the bottom. It's as low as it gets. It has excellent input lag. Doesn't get any lower than that. As far as ease of setup, for a CRT, it's as easy as it gets. You just plug it in. It's plug and play. If you want to plug into an LCD, it's more complicated. You got to find, like if you want to plug a TurboGrafx with RF into an LCD, you got problems. You really can't do it. It's not practical. You need to get some kind of way to get RGB out of that TurboGrafx and upscale it. So then you have to buy an upscaler, and then you have to mess with the resolutions, and it can get complicated trying to get original hardware into an LCD. And I honestly don't know much about it. I've never done it. I went into the CRT route, but I know it's definitely more complicated than a CRT. A couple other things just to point out about original hardware. People talk about, oh, the hardware is failing. This stuff, these are built like tanks. They don't fail very often. You know, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if these Misters and these Raspberry Pis, like tower PCs are gonna, parts of these are gonna fail more often than these for some reason. Like they're just built different and better. But the controllers will fail. You know, that is an issue with those. I'll talk about that in my next video, controllers. So we'll move on to FPGA consoles. I got my Mister right here. Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. So the Mister is an FPGA console. It's not the same as software emulation. It uses hardware emulation, they call it. I'm not going to get into it. You can Google search it. But just know it has no input lag, just like original hardware. And pretty much the gaming experience is identical to original hardware. So the question is, why would you do original hardware when you can get one of these Misters? To me, the answer is you shouldn't. You should just get the Mister. So initially, the Mister is going to cost you between $150 and $300. So people will say that's a lot of money. But when you compare that, like I said, to original hardware, $300 doesn't sound like that much. Like just getting a TurboGrafx going, like I said, is $1,000. Just getting a Super Nintendo going is going to be pretty close to $200, you know, with the EverDrive and original hardware. So, and the Mister will do lots of consoles: Nintendo, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx, it doesn't do PlayStation yet. Someone is working on that, and the Sega Saturn. It does arcade games. They're all, you know, arcade perfect. So it's like having all of your original consoles all in one thing. There are other FPGA consoles like the Analogue products. I can't speak of those. I've never had one. To me, it's silly to get one of those when you can get one of these Misters, because like none of the Analogue products, as far as I know, will play Neo Geo, but this will do everything: Nintendo, Super, Neo Geo. It also does all of the add-ons, so you know, it'll do Neo Geo CD, TurboGrafx CD. It has lots of extra features, just like the Analogue products, that to me puts it over the edge, that makes it superior to playing to original hardware. Like I have my original hardware all hooked up with the switcher, but I never use it anymore because the video quality on this is superior to original hardware. It's just as sharp as I've ever seen. And the audio is better. Like it has features like on the TurboGrafx where you can boost the audio, the CD audio, so you can hear it better. A big problem with the TurboGrafx is that the CD's music is excellent, but a lot of times you can't hear it over the sound effects. Well, you can correct that here on the Mister. The Mister has built-in Game Genie, built-in cheat codes. It's just super easy to use. Yeah, so input lags at the bottom, cost-wise is low in my opinion. Now, how easy is it to set up? Well, it's not what I would call easy to set up, which is probably its main problem. You know, it's easier than the Raspberry Pi. Like, I got that thing going, and I was always messing with that, probably because I was never happy with it. But once I got my Mister set up, I just leave it alone. And it has a software program. You plug it into the internet, and you run a script, they call it, a program called Update All. And if you just do that every couple months, it'll update everything you need. It'll get all the ROMs you need. It'll get all the new cores that have been added. Like I said, people are working on the PlayStation and Saturn core right now, and new stuff gets added. New arcade cores get added. So yeah, it's part of its one of its strengths is its versatility, but it's also a problem in that because it's so versatile, it does take some configuring. You do need to get on the internet and figure out how to set it up. So setting it up to a LCD isn't very hard. It has HDMI out, but getting it to a CRT is a little bit more complicated. You got to tell it, you know, that you're sending native resolutions and you're sending a component, or you're outputting RGB. And it has all these add-on boards. I have an extra board added on here and then extra RAM here. You don't need that to get started. So if you just want to like play TurboGrafx, you can get going for 150 bucks. But if you want to play a Neo Geo and go to a CRT, you might need to drop another $150. So moving on, we're going to talk about software emulation. So I only know Windows software emulation. I started out probably with the Wii, using that, and I played Rondo of Blood, and I thought that was a lot of fun. So I said, okay, how else can I emulate stuff? Well, I got the Raspberry Pi 3 right here to try to do play arcade games, and the input lag was just too low. Even though I was running to a CRT and I was using a wired controller, the input lag was probably around 8 frames on Willow Arcade. So if you're gonna get into software emulation, you need to learn about lag. You need to learn what frames are, how many frames is a lot. You know, I'm not gonna go into detail on that in this video. I have a whole video on input lag if you wanna check that out. How to train yourself to sense input lag, I think it's called. But so I got off of this and I moved on to a tower PC that's more powerful. And so the problem with me is I want to output to a CRT. Trying to get emulation, software emulation to run on a PC to your CRT is difficult. I use CRT EmuDriver. It works excellent. It is very difficult to set up. I don't know if even your average gamer is going to pull it off, but you can do it. And I mean, if you get into this hobby seriously, man, you got to wrench on your rides sometimes. Like, you know, my dad rode motocross. He spent just as much time in the garage, you know, fixing his bikes as he did riding. I try not to do that with video games. I get annoyed if I have to spend too much time wrenching on stuff and getting it to work. But you got to do a little bit of it. Be okay with, you know, you got to sharpen your sword. You got to, you know, fix your buttons on your controller. There's little things to do, and it's worth figuring out how to get this to work with the CRT. However, if you want to hook this up to an LCD monitor, it's pretty easy. You just plug it in, you know, HDMI out. And they do have low lag low lag LCDs now. And I'll talk about that in a minute when I talk about monitors. But yeah, so difficult to hook up to a CRT, easy to hook up to an LCD. Money-wise, it's probably the cheapest on here. Like, you can get a PC, a decent PC for retro gaming for $200. That's going to do all you need it to do. The Pi is even cheaper. Input lag-wise, that's when you have a problem with software emulation. So I'd say, gosh, where to even start with input lag? So you want to get around 4 frames of lag, which is too much for some games. Like Battletoads, you can't beat Battletoads on 4 frames because of the Klinger Winger stage. But most other games are fine around 4 frames of lag. The thing is, most emulators are going to put out between 2 and 4 frames of lag. And then if you have a wireless controller, that's going to add lag. If you have an LCD monitor, that's going to add lag. A lot of games add lag. If you're playing arcade games, a lot of them have between 1 and 6 frames of lag. Metal Slug has 6 frames of lag just on the ROM. That's not with the emulation and the LCD monitor. Metal Slug has 6 frames of lag baked into the game. Then if your emulator's putting out 4 frames, that's 10 frames. Now if your LCD monitor's putting out 4 frames, you're playing Metal Slug at 14 frames of lag. It's just ridiculous. That's what you'd be doing with this just hooked up, like most guys on YouTube are going to tell you, oh, get a Raspberry Pi 3 and plug it into your TV. You're playing Metal Slug at like 14 frames of lag at that point. It's ridiculous. So RetroArch has this feature called run ahead latency reduction, and it will remove the lag baked into the ROM. It's not going to remove your monitor lag. It's not going to remove the emulator lag. But a lot of arcade games, Willow Arcade, one of my favorites, has 4 frames of lag baked into the game. Now I can remove that. Now I'm only getting my monitor lag, and since I use a CRT, there's none. And since I use a wired controller, there's no lag there. I only have lag from my emulator. And my emulator puts out around 4 frames of lag. Well, with arcade games, I mean, since the game natively had 4 frames of lag baked into the game, I'm playing it at arcade levels of lag. And I've played it on the Mister, and it's indistinguishable. The input lag on the Mister is indistinguishable from my Windows PC with my CRT emu driver, the lag-wise. So, yeah, you got to find a way to limit lag if you're going to get into software emulation. Maybe that's you get a less than 1 frame LCD monitor. I mean, there's tricks with VSync and FreeSync now they have on LCDs. You're going to have to wrap your head around that. I do not recommend the Pi 3. It can't run ahead, so there's just too much lag on arcade games. There is a Pi 4 out now, and I know that it can run ahead, and I just don't know about that. That would be worth looking into. And guys, one of the reasons I'm showing you this video is so that you don't have to go out and buy all of this stuff that I have, you know. I got BVMs over here. Let's just take a look over here for a second. See what Rigel's packing. All right, so I got, you know, a switcher in there. I got, look at this stuff. I got extension cables in here, you know. This is extension cables. I got a Mega Drive up there. I got, what do I got in here? You know, friggin' got a GunCon in here. Just stuff. I have a whole nother, excuse me, dresser full of stuff. Like, more controllers. Like, I just got so much stuff. And this wasn't because I'm collecting. It's because I was trying to figure out how to do this. I'm trying to save you guys from having to buy all this. Like, you can get by very well just getting a Mister and an emulation setup. You don't need all this stuff. You don't need all this original hardware. It just gets super expensive. You know, and a switch box. I got a switcher up there. That's actually really convenient. Yeah, so I'm trying to save you from that. Let's talk about monitors. Let's talk about monitors. So, for here I got, you know, a couple CRTs and an LCD monitor. So I don't use that LCD monitor. It's just up there for show right now. I just brought it out for demonstration purposes. So when I got into gaming, there was no low lag LCD monitors. So I basically had to get into CRTs. But these things were a dime a dozen. I found pro monitors. I picked up 4 or 5 of them for free. Well, actually this one cost me $250, this BVM, but my other pro monitors were free. One of them I bought a guy a pizza for, but whatever. They were so cheap, like you were getting them for free. And then that dried up, and I started getting these for free. These, you know, very high-end consumer CRTs. And, you know, that's drying up now. So these CRTs are on the availability is on the way out, you know, and the strengths of these LCDs is on the way up. So in the future, we might just need to make peace with LCDs, because these CRTs are getting more scarce and these LCDs are getting better. I just don't know a lot about it. I mean, I read that they got LCDs under 1 frame of lag, and some of them have FreeSync, which allows you to, I think you don't need to use VSync when you use FreeSync. And so VSync is a thing that keeps the screen from tearing when you software emulate, and it adds 1 frame of lag, but it makes your games look really good. So you can get an LCD monitor that will have 1 less frame of lag than a CRT, because when you run a CRT, you have to use VSync with software emulation. But the LCD doesn't. So if the LCD has FreeSync and it's a sub 1 frame of lag LCD and you're software emulating, you probably have less lag than on a CRT. So that's really appealing for software emulation. So that's probably the way to go for a lot of people starting out. I can't speak on it too much because, like I said, I don't have experience with LCDs. So we're going to wrap up this video, and you should just watch my next video if you're still staying tuned, because I'm going to cover controllers in that.